Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Cyberpunk 2077, the board game from Go On Board. I should note, this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. I'll also note that if you're used to my usual reviews and you want something that's going to be a change of pace, this is going to be a very, very different review than usual. It's going to be much more conversational around the game, the nature of my opinion, the review itself, and all of this is going to be directly inspired by a commentator on one of my recent videos who kind of said, hey, I don't know if you're going to be doing the same song and dance Emperor's New Clothes routine that all the other content creators have done on this game. And I didn't know what that meant. And so I asked some questions because I haven't watched any other content in the game. I've spoken to other content creators who've played the game. I've spoken to content creators before and after they've played the game. We're going to talk about that too. But I hadn't actually watched any other content in the game. And so I probed. I asked further, like, what does that mean? And apparently his stance, and a few people's stance apparently in the comments, were that a lot of people seem to really like this game. A lot of reviewers seem to like this game, but the gameplay seems evidently and obviously bad, and they're all just going on about how much they enjoy the game with no real criticisms whatsoever, and it all feels like just one giant marketing campaign from Go On Board and a bunch of content creators afraid to lose access to their prototypes in the future. Which puts me in a weird position because I really like the game. And so the problem is, if I really like the game, and that's already the opinion, and it doesn't help, disclaimer by the way, that I'm CMO of GameFound, the platform that this game is running on. This game is running on GameFound, and if I really like the game, and there's already a degree of distrust, and I can't even resent that distrust, because speaking frankly, I walked in very, very skeptical about whether a real-time app-driven game would work for me, when most real-time games have left my collection, and most app-driven games, I tend to prefer non-app-driven games, and this is all with the baseline that my good friend Devin Norris from Devin Talks Tabletop, and from Look It Up Games, that he told me personally, I probably should check with people before I talk about what they said or didn't say, but he told me personally this is his favorite game from Go On Board. He absolutely loved it. He had an amazing time, and I still walked in skeptical to playing this game. And so how am I supposed to convince you that anything I say is anything other than a song and dance Emperor's New Clothes? Now, the problem is I debated whether to go into this or not because, speaking frankly, I want my reviews to come across as, hey, this is a review, this is a format. I don't want my reviews to start with a talking point from someone who commented on a previous video. It kind of puts us in a weird place. Like, I can't imagine whether Go On Board puts this on their campaign page or not. It feels very unprofessional. It's much more conversational, which, frankly, I kind of like, but it takes a little bit away from the nature of an ever-going, ongoing review that can be seen forever because it's a little weird, this review. But I also think it's a worthwhile review to get into, and it's a conversational point to dive into as well. Because I'll start with this. This game for me, I'm going to start off the bat with this, I guess off the bat a few minutes into the video. This to me currently is going to be a 4.5 out of 5. That's going to be my rating for this review. I told you we're going wildly out of order compared to my usual reviews. And even that 4.5 out of 5, initially I wanted to give it a 5 out of 5. I think this game is that much fun. The only reason I'm dialing it back is not because of any public perception or worry about that, because at the end of the day, as much as I do worry about public perception, I do worry about, like, will I be taken seriously? Do I love too many games? And I don't. I get rid of most games. Most games I rate them a 3.5 out of 5. And it doesn't help that Go On Board, I like their games a lot. I gave The Witcher Old World a 5 out of 5. I gave The Witcher Path of Destiny a 4 out of 5. It's not nearly as good, but still very enjoyable. That's another game, by the way, that a lot of people were like, the gameplay looks so obviously bad. Despite me knowing a lot of people who have enjoyed the game personally, but nonetheless, those things happen. And this one is a 5 out of 5 for me, and I really enjoy it. The only reason it would be a 5 out of 5, the reason I'm shying back from that is not any concern about how it be taken, but the reality is this is a real-time game. And I do know from my own personal experience that real-time games always start off for me a little higher, and then most of the time, over time, the gimmick tends to show its face, and the real-time aspect that made the game enjoyable to an extent, at the end of the day, those games don't last forever for me. And so I am dinging at that half point because what if that happens I've played this a decent amount. I mean, a decent amount's relative. I've played through all the prologues, and I've played through the first mission, 4 point whatever it is, because that's the content we have access to. And so I played this enough to know that I enjoy it, and I played it enough to know that it holds well past a few plays, but I don't know if I played it enough to know if it has longevity. And so that's where my rating is going to be, a 4.5 out of 5. Feel free to watch the rest of the video or not. Keep in mind, I haven't even gone into how the game plays or anything about it. Let's do that. Let's dive briefly into how the game plays, a general overview of what's going on in the game, and then I'll come back to the nature of reviews, opinions, other content creators, people I've talked to who've played this game, and all that kind of stuff. But let's start with this. Cyberpunk 2077, the board game. This is a real-time, app-driven, scenario-based game. I believe it has single-shot modes. I'm not honestly certain about that because I've been going through the campaign aspect of it. But you're going to have characters over here. We have our character set up over here. You're going to be choosing those in the app. You're going to go into the app. You'll choose your characters. You'll give a little team name. You'll go through the story that the app gives you. And then after that, the app is a glorified timer. It does more than being a timer, but it is mostly a glorified timer where the music will start going. It'll count down. It'll ping with sound effects when you have 10 seconds left or whatnot. But then there's things you can do in the app as well. You can add time when you earn time in the game. Tap to go ahead and add 10 seconds. Depending on the mission or puzzle, there might be a few more things going on. But for the most part, my experience so far, and I can't say how that will work over the rest of the campaign as things unlock and whatnot, but for the most part, it has been a game that gives you the story, the narrative, the background music and effects, all while you're not actually playing the game. And then you dive into the game and it basically runs as a timer for the game. A good timer for the game, and a timer that's essentially, you can't just use a regular 2-minute timer because missions are created differently. Some missions are a 2-minute timer, some missions are a 3-minute timer, some missions are whatever it is as you go through them, and then again that aspect of being able to add time as you earn it. But then past that, the real time of this game comes down to those 2 to 4 minute chunks of time, where effectively you have a plan, you have a mission you're going through over here, you have specific things you're trying to do because you're going to have different goals. You're going to have your own, here we have our little prologue 1 card over here. It's going to give you like, little prologue. It's going to be the things you're trying to do on this different points on the mission map. So we have our A somewhere over here. Where's A? We have our C over here. You have different points on the board that are going to relate to certain missions you're trying to accomplish. You're going to have rewards that you'll earn, and some missions will be some multi-step missions where you're going through multiple floors as you all retreat to the central elevator with your characters. And along the way, you're going on these bursts of time while you try to take the actions you need as you charge through the mission map, trying to make your way to the various points, being mindful as you cross into line of sight of the various operatives who now will have an opportunity to go ahead and roll dice to go ahead and target you in the game, rolling dice and shooting you back and forth as you try to go ahead and take them out. Or maybe you don't try to take them out because frankly, killing everyone is not necessarily always the point. Sometimes killing people is just a way to stay alive in this game, but you have to be mindful of the fact that you have your own objective, you have limited amounts of time, and you're working within these real-time elements where you're desperately rolling dice while talking to your teammate, because depending on where you start off, it won't start off this way, but as you get higher in the missions, there's going to be more and more collaboration needed between the various goals. You have to do this while I go do this, and we have to get to point D first and go ahead and get that done, cashed in first before we can tackle point A. So you go to point D, you let me know when you're done. Meanwhile, I'll try to go ahead and round the map and gather various loot tokens and whatnot and take down as many enemies as I can, clearing the way so that by the time you're ready, I can go ahead and do what I need to do. Meanwhile, in between missions, you're powering up. You're gathering these cards, adding them to your tableau, taking these cards, and then as you play cards onto your grid over here, playing these cards desperately real time, trying to resolve them, you're going to go ahead and look to see where your stats are up, how many things you've unlocked, utilizing them towards anything on the board itself, or being able to unlock these upgrades that will help take people out. And you are powering up as you go through it. You're slowly but surely moving these tokens further and further so that as you play a card, instead of being able to just unlock the first row, when I play this card over here, I can go ahead and unlock 2 rows because I have that over there. And as we get further, I can go again and unlock more. I can start adding a card to my board, going for the deluxe cards, adding to my grid, and getting more done with these card plays. You are powering up through the game as you go through these sessions of real-time frenetic mayhem, calm down in between them with little moments of planning where you can work with your teammates to try to figure out what the right plan of approach is, and do you have enough time to get things done. The game does a good job ramping you up slowly through the prologue with stuff that is absorbable, and you can get a good sense or feel of how to play without being too overwhelmed. That first time you dive into the game might be a little crazy because sure, you know the rules, you either learned them yourself, you got taught them, but it will be overwhelming unless you play that first round without a real-time element, which frankly I do recommend. I think that's a good way to ease people into the game. Low attention, just play cards and do things. There's really no rush. Just get a few cards done and then start diving into the real-time elements. But you are going to be constantly trying to power up, and you are going to be constantly on your toes, and you are going to constantly feel on edge as you play. Because you are operating, as you go through those prologues and as you start to move into the real missions, the game does get very difficult. Now, there's a bunch of things as far as modulating difficulty or stuff you can do, but the game is going to present a real challenge that you're going to try to figure out, okay, great, how much time do we have, and can we get everything done? This is neither a walk in the park, nor overwhelmingly difficult to the point of not being achievable. Every time I've played this, and again, prologue's going to be a bit different, once you get past those prologues, everything I've played is going to feel tense, with the caveat that there's not a ton past the prologues, at least not in the prototype just yet. But the new missions as the game goes on are going to add new mechanics, new things you can do, new little mini puzzles that continue what you've learned so far and what you've brought in, what you've figured out as far as how to play cards and how to get a little better at understanding how the enemy's going to react and how to avoiding conflicts when you can, or breaking through walls with abilities, doing what you need to accomplish your goals. As you get better at those things, the game is going to introduce new elements to you, new elements that give you new little mini puzzles. And that's where the game does unlock its kind of forever mode, which can be a degree of combinations of different mechanics that you've unlocked as you've gone through the game. Keeping in mind, I've only seen some of those mechanics because this is a prototype, so I've seen some of the mechanics, I've heard about this forever mode, I haven't actually played the forever mode where you can just, like, again, incorporate different elements from different games to provide a unique session for you. That's the core idea of what this game is doing. I'm not really diving into the details, individual aspects of things, but that's the core idea of what this game is doing and how it operates. Which brings us back to the review part of things, where I will dive into why I like this game. But I think I first have to really address the fact that I understand the skepticism around this game. I understand the skepticism of a real-time game and an app-driven game, and whether that's going to be a good experience. Because I can't speak for you, but I can speak for me. I do shy away from app-driven games. That's not a problem for me here, only because so far the app is mostly a glorified timer. And for a glorified timer, I'm not really concerned. Games that really have me focusing in on the app, where the app is the focus of the gameplay and the app is something that has to be present and being run, that's not something that works for me. But I can tell you that this is a game you can have one person with the app running and have barely anyone else ever looking at the actual phone or whatever it is you're running the game on. It's mostly a timer. You'll hear the story. You can ignore it. You can never touch it. You can never deal with it. This is really not an app-driven game, at least not what I've seen so far. I cannot speak for later missions, but it is a game that does have an app involved with it. And that's why it hasn't bothered me. To me, this is more like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, where sure, the app's in play, but I don't feel like the app is the focus, and that's usually when I get pulled out of a system. When I feel in between everything, I'm touching an app, I'm tapping, I'm choosing which character to activate it, that's when I don't like what app-driven games can do as far as taking me away from the board. This is not that. I think you can be playing this game with your friends, and 3 of the 4 of you will never have to touch or look at the app as you go through it. Again, as things unlock, as mechanics develop, I can't guarantee that holds true, but that's mostly seems to be my experience so far. That covers the app-driven part of things, but I didn't know this until I played it. The real-time one is much more complicated. Real-time for me is a gimmick that has mostly resulted in game experiences that I can enjoy, but not game experiences that give me lasting game experiences. And even if we're talking about things like, whether it's, Kitchen Rush or Rush MD, or whether it's Escape the Curse of the Temple, or even something as much as I loved, oh my gosh, what's the Magic Maze? Magic Maze, that's a delightful game where the real-time element is pretty well done. For the most part, real-time games do have a degree of gimmickness attached to them as far as, hey, part of the fun of this is the fact that you're on a clock. You're on a clock and you're trying to desperately do everything. And I do find most game experiences that offer that, they do tend to be enjoyable, but they don't tend to last for me. I can't speak for you. Your own collection is going to be different. Everyone's collection is going to be different, but they don't tend to last for me. And so when I heard this was a real-time game, the first time I heard it was a real-time game, I was like, well, I'm already less interested. I'm not here for the Cyberpunk 2077 theme. I never have been. I never played the video game. I don't care. I do have the board game from Simon somewhere behind me. I'm realizing I have an empty cubby over there, but I don't think you can actually see it, so I think we're fine. But I do have the Cyberpunk 2077 from Simon that I've enjoyed. That's the closest I've come to enjoying the Cyberpunk universe. I've never really cared past the universe itself, so the theme isn't pulling me in. Which means once you have that, and then you tell me it's a real-time game, I'm already less interested. At this point, honestly, the main thing holding me here is the fact that I've really, really enjoyed The Witcher Old World from Go On Board, so they've earned some sort of street cred with me as far as the game experiences, and The Witcher Path of Destiny was very, very good. Not the same level I'm going to dive into this, but hey, I'll try this out, we'll see where it goes. And then obviously I do have a relationship with them, they asked me to play it, or they gave it to send to me to cover, and so there is that aspect of diving into it, but I was definitely less excited. And again, this is all despite the fact that I knew a good friend of mine said it was one of his favorite games, and I was like, hey, our tastes differ sometimes, that's okay. And before playing this game, I can tell you that I spoke to a bunch of other content creators, before I played this, I spoke to other content creators who walked in with the same skepticism. This is where I won't name names because I don't know who asked to be in this video. I'm close enough with Devin, I don't mind talking about him, but there are a bunch of content creators. I want to say 1, 2, 3, 4, easily 4 different people. 4 different people who also hadn't played this game before and also walked in with the same degree of skepticism that I had. This is a real-time app-driven game, which again, not really app-driven, but has that aspect. Is this going to be an experience that's worth it? Or is it just going to be a gimmick? A game that doesn't hold up? And I can't speak long-term, but I can tell you that every single one of those 4 people I spoke to, when I spoke to them after, they all really had a fun time with it. Now, I can't tell you if they're lying to me or not. I mean, I don't imagine there's any reason to do so, but I can tell you that I know several people who walked into this game skeptical and walked away convinced. And the problem is, why should you believe me? Why should you believe us? If you're walking in with the same skepticism, but you have the additional level that you feel you're being sold to, because that's the nature of covering anything. The nature of being in the content creator space. Again, this is going to be a deep dive into a whole different thing, but there's an element of distrust. There's an element of, whether you're getting paid to do a video. I should know, by the way, this is not a sponsored video. I'm not getting paid for this video at all. But whether there's a payment involved, or whether there's just the access to prototypes, or whether it's because I work for GameFound, there's going to be that distrust, that feeling that you're being sold to. And it's impossible to really get past that. I can tell you that there's no reason or incentive for any of the 5 different people who have played this game who told me how much they enjoyed it. There's no incentive for them to lie to me. Although maybe I'm making this all up and lying to you, so I can't guarantee that. But there's no incentive for them to lie to me about how much they enjoyed the game. Which is why I know that I'm not alone in my experience here. I'm going to try to dive into more about why I feel the way I do about this game. But it's hard. It's hard to overcome that. There's 60,000 people following this campaign page. Go On Board has had multiple campaigns that have done tremendously well. And so there's that distrust. They're no longer that small, scrappy startup company that you can all believe and trust in. They're now part of selling huge, massive IPs, and you can never actually believe their games are good or not. Although I should say, look at some of their prior work. How have their previous games fared? Did you like The Witcher Old World? I love The Witcher Old World. It's one of my favorite game experiences. I know it hasn't been for everyone, but I think it has been very well received, and that should count for something. They're not just popping out a game just for the sake of popping out a game. Sure, they're working with IPs now, but it doesn't mean that the games are inherently bad. The Witcher Old World is an IP, and it is a very good game. I can't speak to The Witcher Path of Destiny because most of you have not had a chance to actually play that yet, so I can't really talk about that. But what I can say is that a big thing to look at, in general, with me, with other content creators, with whoever, is not just how they talked about a single game, but how they talked about all games. I loved The Witcher Old World. I did. And I liked The Path of Destiny a lot. But this is going to rank much higher than, not The Witcher Old World. I like this more. I like Witcher Old World more than this. But I like this more than The Path of Destiny. And something you have to ask yourself at times is like, why one game versus another? Why is one game hyped and one game not? Is there just unless they hype everything. If the person you're watching hypes everything and makes everything sound like the greatest thing since sliced bread, I understand that. But if the person likes one game more than another, you should look at those things too and take those into account. And I'd say the most compelling thing I can say about this game is I think if you like Project Elite from Simon Games and whatnot, I think if you like Project Elite, I think this is a game you'll really, really like. And I think if you don't like Project Elite, this should definitely be a try before you buy for you. Because that's the game I would most compare the experience and feeling for it. I mentioned that I don't really love real-time games, that I like them, I enjoy the experience, but they don't tend to last for me. The only one that has lasted, that's been in my collection for 4 or 5 years now, I don't know, it's been in my collection for a while. I had the original Project Elite before Simon, reprinted it. That's actually stuck around. Well, not that one. I got rid of that one when the new one arrived. But I've had that game in my collection this whole time. And I love it when I play it. And it gives me a frenetic experience of tactical shooting. I don't know. There's a tactical shooting as you run around a board trying to roll dice and have the aliens, not overwhelm the mat as you just operate on these bursts of real-time 2-minute energy where you interrupt those with planning and upgrading. And so there's both that upgrading phase where you feel as a character you're getting more powerful, but also you then have to dive back into it with what you have now, trying to overpower whatever the game is throwing at you. I don't know why Project Elite works where the other ones don't for me. I don't know for sure. Maybe it's the nature of having a dudes in a map skirmish game combined with that real-time element. Maybe that's where it works best for me. Maybe when I'm assembling ingredients in a kitchen, it's not the same level of fear. Maybe when I'm rushing out of a temple, it's not as satisfying. Maybe there's something about building up a character and getting stronger and more powerful before diving into 2-minute bursts and then going back and repeating that cycle again and again. Maybe that works for me. I don't know. Honestly, the only two I've played in that genre are going to be Cyberpunk 2077 and Project Elite, the board game. And both of those really do work for me. And so I think that's the biggest thing I'd say if you're wondering whether this game is going to work for you or not. And many of you may not have had a chance to play Project Elite, and I understand that. Although I'd say if you can get your hands on a copy before this campaign ends, that's probably a good way to see if this is something you'll enjoy. Because there are definite differences between these two games. But I think both of them are games where if you look at them on a surface level, it's a bunch of people on a clock just desperately doing things as fast as possible while trying to accomplish their objectives. I don't think either game is going to ever look compelling in its own right, but I do think that they are satisfying experiences. And so the only thing I guess I could really say as far as the appeal to trusting that I actually enjoy this game is just knowing what target audience you're in. If you like Project Elite, you'll probably like this game. If you didn't like Project Elite, you probably won't like this game. I assume. I can't say for sure, but I think they're operating very much in the same general vein. As far as why I like this game, and some of it's hazarding a guess because I don't know for sure why other real-time games don't work for me long term, and this, well, Project Elite has, and this one I think will. But I think there is something incredibly satisfying, I'll say, about the cooperative nature of how these work. The idea that you are operating as a squad, under a timer while you try to get things done, it does feel to a certain extent almost like a video game into a board game. That aspect of, hey, we're working together, there's teamwork. So you have the tactical nature, the tactile aspect of a board game, of a tabletop experience where you're not glued to your screens. And again, with the timer and everything, you're not glued to your screens. And so you have that feeling. But then you have the thematicness of being a squad. There is something fun and appealing and compelling about being a squad working against odds, and well, in Project Elite's overwhelming odds of aliens trying to shoot down. And in this one, it's the nature of the clock that's slowly ticking down, and the fact that you have a limited number of turns to get what you need done as you wander around whatever floor you're on, as you deal with the various enemies, but just as often as you try not to deal with enemies. This is not a shoot-'em-up game. This takes what Project Elite does and it puts it slightly more into a stealth-based mission. It's a little bit of XCOM, the board game, combined with Project Elite, giving you that more tactical nature of what you're trying to accomplish, but with the deadline of a real-time clock. The real time is done incredibly well, altering as far as, how many minutes you have per round, depending on the scenario you're playing as, depending on the floor you're playing as, with the ability to earn extra time. The card-driven system, where you're playing a bunch of cards, where you're playing cards down, depending on how many, how high you are in certain tracks, you're able to get more done. The fact that you can possibly play this done and get 6 shots off, insta-killing one of these guys, taking them out and being able to go ahead and get the extra things they need. Being able to heal yourself or go ahead and move across the board. Being able to break holes in walls. Where's my little wall break tokens over here? Being able to break holes in walls to jump through something over here, take them by surprise, take them out, and get more quickly to your objective, and then back to the elevator before things run out. This game does give you that feel of that tactical grid combined with the real-time elements, combined with the fact that you are leveling up as you go through things, that you're getting more and more stuff. These things, these cards that you're going to play out and draft every single round, giving you more and more goodies and benefits and stuff you can earn throughout those rounds, it is going to make you feel more powerful while you're going through it. And again, there's that sense of teamwork where very often in the later rounds, you're going to have things where you have to rely on the other people at the table to talk to them about what they're doing, and you're trying to do all of that while under the threat of that timer constantly ticking down. This is a game that I don't think it's appealing to someone who is looking for something that is hardcore strategy without that freneticness of real time. The freneticness does add to the experience, but you still have to be the kind of person who enjoys that. If you have never liked a real-time game, I don't think this is, going to change your mind. I can't imagine. I think it does depend on what you get out of a real-time experience. If you're concerned as to whether real-time is for you, that I can't help you with in this video. If you're concerned as to whether this is a good implementation of a real-time game, it's either my second favorite or my favorite. I don't know yet which one. For context, part of why I hesitated on my rating for this game, part of why I hesitated on whether it's a 5 or 4.5 is, on the one hand, I think I enjoy this more than Project Elite, which has historically been my favorite real-time game. It's always been my favorite real-time game so far. It's a 5 out of 5 for me, and this I like more than that. I'm only dinging the rating because I need more time. I know that real-time is something that does have a degree of gimmickiness to it. There is something about this being under the moment and in the moment and just the pressure of it that makes you have a more enjoyable experience in the short term, but may not have that long-term longevity in the long term. And so for that, I'm dinging that rating just a bit because I want more time with this game. I want more missions with the game. I want to see how the campaign plays out, the pros and cons of the campaign mode. I want to see what the final end game is like. The very nature of having a campaign mode and having your characters grow to an extent through it does mean that when you dive into a single shot game that doesn't have that arc and that growth, will that still be a satisfying experience, or do I only now enjoy it because of the nature of progressing through a sequence of missions? And there's still questions attached to this game because of that. And so I don't know ultimately where this game will end up long term. But I do believe that if you are someone, I'm trying to think how to say the same thing again for the 17th time but differently. I think ultimately, I wouldn't want to convince you to spend potentially hundreds of dollars on this game if you've never enjoyed a real-time game. But if you have, and this appeals to you, I think there's a very good game here. It still has to be something you're okay with. Real-time as a concept still has to be something not just you're okay with, but that you get value from. This game will force you to make strategic choices. It will give you a cinematic feel as you go through it. And it will give you the pressure of a timer. But it's not just about the pressure of the timer. There very much is a good game behind everything going on. But it still is. Real-time is still baked into the core DNA of what this game is. And that's why I think you do have to have enjoyed something real-time for this to be a game that resonates with you. But if you have, to me, it's either the best or the second best real-time game I've played. And that's kind of my very non-standard review for Cyberpunk 2077, the board game. I am excited to see what comes through in the campaign. I don't know what will or won't be. I don't know what's going to be there. And I do think a game like this, where a lot of the central mechanism is around real-time, there is that concern about campaign bloat. There is that concern about what's going to be in that all-in pledge. What is going to add to the game experience and what's not. And I'd say for that is, if you're unsure, stick with the core game pledge, because again, I haven't even experienced the full core game. I've experienced the first three missions or prologues, whatever it is, plus diving into Icebreaker or whatever it is, which is the first mission. Past that, it's an arc of missions technically. So I've really only experienced a small amount of what the game has to offer, and I can just tell you that I enjoy it based off of that. I can't speak for everything else that comes. I hope this helped. I don't know if it will. Because for me, despite knowing it's Go On Board, despite liking their other games, and despite having a good friend tell me it's his favorite game that they made, I still walked in very skeptical as to where I was going to end up. And so I imagine you are too. So, may luck guide you in your choice or something like that. This is not usually how I do reviews, so I'm a little off my game as far as how I end something like that. I enjoyed it. That's my review. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this helpful. And as always, I hope you have a good one.